John, the big get, Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12.
And Andrew, they said it could never be done, but it was. Our 100th episode.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Unbelievable. And we're back. The Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast, episode number 100. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. On the board, as always, the master of the board is Chris Mason. AC White puts it all together. If you like, if you follow, if you rate, and you write something nice, we appreciate it. John, 100th episode. Who would have thought? I think Al had it right. Do you believe in miracles?
Absolutely. We're going to talk about it a little bit toward the end of the show, but your favorite guests, that we've had. It's 100 shows. That's a lot. And what I keep thinking about, Andrew, you keep saying we need to go to 200 before we really get our rhythm going. So we're only halfway there.
Well, I was told that by a top audio executive that 200 shows is when you really evaluate a podcast. So we're halfway through. The fact that we made it halfway through. Here's the thing about it. People are like, congratulations. Well, anybody can have a podcast, and we're proving that every week. But let's just explain this podcast. We're doing a little bit different. Not looking back to the 100 shows, but we're going to have our top 5 topics of the 100 shows, discuss those. We'll have our who's up, who's down in a moment. And then, of course, the big guy, a real good one, Big 12, Brett Yormark, the commissioner. Excited to bring that in a little bit. But let's go. Who's up and who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
All right, Andrew, over 100 episodes. Who is your first 100th? Who's up?
My who's up is Tom Brady. Now, this is going to be one of the topics later. I could have gone Peyton Manning, could have gone Tony Romo, could have gone Greg Olsen, who I think Greg Olsen actually is the leader in terms of my most who's ups. But I'm going to go Tom Brady because I think he shows how big the sports media game has become, not only because of his 10-year, $375 million contract, but he's considered the greatest football player of all time, and he's going to be in the broadcast booth. Wait, what does the Brady meter say? Brady meter. Brady meter 50-50. All right, Brady meter's at 50-50. We'll leave it there.
No change on the Brady meter. No change.
Well, it was 51-49, and that was the last time we said this caused some issues. But Tom Brady, I think, is just emblematic of how big this topic has become, if it's college football, if it's the regional sports networks. But he's considered the greatest football player of all time, and then he's next going to be in the broadcast booth in a year. And we've seen so many ramifications for what is going on, especially in the NFL booths, but just all over the place with the NBA booths. Baseball everywhere. A lot of change over the last 100 episodes. And I think Tom Brady signing with Fox Sports, though, was the biggest and most important. And if he ends up doing it, will be the biggest topic a year from now.
My who's up, Andrew, is Marie Donahue, who is the top executive for Amazon. And this is why. When they went to get the Thursday Night Football package, it was a package that every single TV network passed on. So it looked like it was destined to fail. The viewership was certain to be low. The production quality was good. The viewership was low, but that was to be expected. But they proved that they could amass a big audience and not have everything crash. And so I think by all respects, Thursday Night Football on Amazon has been a resounding success, and that was not certain when we started this pod 100 episodes ago. So congratulations to Marie and to Amazon on that. Once they got the NFL, and once they found success with the NFL, look, this is the Jeff Bezos company. They have the deepest pockets that are out there. So I thought that they would start spending money indiscriminately just to keep getting sports rights. And what I've seen is that they've been very disciplined, much more disciplined than I ever would have expected in terms of where they're going to put their money and what kind of packages that they want. So they're not trying to build an ESPN Plus or even become a worldwide leader in sports on digital. They're being very methodical and getting packages that make sense for Amazon, and their strategy is coming through. We can see it now, and I think over the last 100 weeks, it has been a resounding success for Marie and for Amazon.
All right, my who's down are the ESPN direct-to-consumer naysayers. One of the big things we started talking about this right from the beginning is when will ESPN, the whole enchilada, go direct-to-consumer? I said it then, it would be within 5 years. It's going to be within 5 years. Not going to be next year, unlikely. 2025, very possible. It will happen by 26. I think anybody who doubted that ESPN was going direct to consumer is going to be proven wrong. Now, things do change, but you could just see the trends this week. The NFL with NFL Network brought it direct to consumer. We've seen it in the regional sports networks. They've gone mostly direct to consumer, at least offering that product. And here's another prediction. When ESPN goes direct to consumer, I don't think it's going to have as big an impact over the cable bundle, which is, of course, going down and will continue to until it probably plateaus around 50 million. But that said, it's happening. So my who's down is all the ESPN direct to consumer naysayers, because if people listen to this, we've been talking about this subject and writing about it for a long time. I know it's become very popular in recent months, but the ESPN direct to consumer naysayers will be proven wrong. And by 2026, ESPN will have a product where you don't need cable, which will be a huge thing, but I don't think it will be as groundbreaking in terms of changing the business. I think the business will already be changing at that point, even without it.
Andrew, mine is down, no surprise at all. At the Super Bowl in Arizona, I was walking out of the press room, and this guy came up to me and showed me his fantasy football team name was Who's Down Chris Ripley. And he said he was the only one in his league that understood it, but he thought it was funny. So that's what he made the name. Chris Ripley of Sinclair, the obvious choice for Who's Down over the first 100 episodes. We're going to talk about the RSN implosion. That's one of the topics that is coming up. But it's an implosion that didn't have to be this quick and this violent. If you look at the NBC sports, regional sports networks, they're still profitable. They're not as profitable as they used to be, but they're still profitable. If you look at Yes Network, or what's happening in Los Angeles with the Dodgers and the Lakers networks, or Nesson, even Masson, which has had a couple of tough headlines over the past couple of weeks, that's still a profitable network. Sinclair, which used to run the Bally Sports networks, they mismanaged those networks. They mismanaged the relationships. We already taped our interview with Brett Yormark, and one of the things he talks about is how he's a relationship guy. You hear that in the sports and media business all the time. Chris Ripley mismanaged every relationship with big people who matter, like Rob Manfred and with the NBA. There was no reason why those RSNs had to drop as far and as fast as they did. And over the first 100 episodes, I think that's a pretty clear call.
No, 100%. If you didn't do Chris Ripley, there would have been a riot about the pod, because he's obviously Who's Down. And that's great. That fantasy football name. And if we inspire any other fantasy, why didn't you tell that story earlier? That's a tremendous story.
Well, I was waiting to get the guy's name. I wanted to give him an actual shout out, and I never got his name, and we never followed up on it. So if you're listening to this, let me know, because I love that name.
All right, let's go to the topics. Like we said, this is going to be top 100 show topics. And so we have our top 5 stories. And you could debate, you could put some others in there, but the number one story, we'll start there. We just talked about maybe doing descending order, but let's go. We're going to go in ascending order. The number one story, maybe we get a little drum roll. Thank you, Chris Mason. ESPN in transition, which is, I think when we did this list, it's not only the stories that just happened, but what is going to happen. When I say ESPN in transition, what do you think, John?
I see a network that has grown. It was known as the worldwide leader in sports. They stopped calling themselves that, a long time ago, but it grabbed every rights package that was out there. It overspent on rights in order to keep other people out of the business. And the ESPN of today if you look at what they've passed on, even they passed on NASCAR, they passed on the Big Ten, they passed on the Pac-12, they passed on MLS. Like this isn't the ESPN that you and I grew up with, Andrew. They're being much tighter with their purse strings. They're seeing a cable business that has dropped from more than 100,000 homes down to around 70, and it looks to be continuing to drop. So it's tough, and they're doing different things. Like one of the topics this week, if it weren't our 100th episode, certainly would have been the Penn Gaming.
Well, let's talk about the Penn Gaming. Let's get into it. Just because it's a 100th show, we don't have to be like totally limited. Because that hit right before we'd already recorded, so we didn't really chime in on the pod. ESPN bet, what's your take on that deal with Penn? It's for it can be worth $2 billion over 10 years. What's your thought process on that?
I wasn't surprised to see ESPN do that because they've been talking about doing this for more than a year. What did surprise me is that this is ESPN. I just assumed that they were going to match up with a FanDuel, with a DraftKings, with an MGM, one of the big players in the business, and they decided to go to Penn. Where would you rank Penn? 4 or 5? Like
I don't have official rankings, but yeah.
Well, we'll set up the Mando rankings right after the Tom Brady meter. So I was surprised about that, and I'm curious to see where this goes. But ESPN already has gambling shows, related shows across all of its platforms. You see odds and bets on all the time. Scott Van Pelt, the first guest on the Mando pod, has the Bad Beats, which is a viral segment on his SportsCenter show. So it's not a huge surprise, but it signifies that this is a way for ESPN sort of to see its way forward by bringing in significant revenue. When
I heard that news become official, yeah, I agree. I wasn't surprised at all. I don't know if it's as like going to change the, people are like, people are making a lot of drastic assumptions about ESPN and what it means. I just think they're getting in. This is cash. I know that their thing is that we want to be where the fans want it, and the fans are saying that they want them to be there. Yeah, maybe. I think it's about money. Quite honestly, this is an infusion of cash in a business that is still doing very well, but doesn't have the cable revenue streams. They aren't what they once were. So of course you're going to look for ways to make more money. And everyone in sports has gotten into the betting game. I don't know if we look at it 5-10 years from now, is this the right thing to be doing? I'm not really positive about that overall in terms of, but everyone's doing it. So that, there's no excuse really at this point, even though Bob Iger had his reservations initially. Now, they need the money. So they're doing it, but I don't think it's going to change ESPN that much. I think you'll see it as part of the programming. I think Pat McAfee, it kind of puts that deal in the focus, and maybe McAfee gets some money from this deal as well, so that around $85 million that I reported over 5 years that he's making could get a little bit of a bonus there. That wouldn't surprise me if some people are cut in. I think that's been discussed in recent years about some of the big name people who have had gambling opportunities, or that's been a threat. So I wouldn't be surprised if McAfee makes a little more money than he initially was. And so I think it helps them, but I don't think it's changing anything. And then let's just get to direct consumer.
Well, in fact, before you go on, they're still going to be able to sell ads to DraftKings and the FanDuel and the other companies. I don't know if they'll want to get buy those ads. I suspect they probably will. So it's really just, like you said, an influx of money that's coming in. And you're going to see a little bit more branded programming maybe on there, but I can't foresee that you'll see more gambling related programming on the sports that you watch.
And then let's just get to before we move to the second topic. When we talk about ESPN DTC, are you on board with me that it's going to happen maybe 25, but 26 at the latest?
It's going to be right on the cusp of our original bet. I think it's 25 is what it is.
We're going to be looking up dates about the official first.
I think you don't have to. I've said this before, but the idea that Kevin Mayer is in there and under the hood right now suggests it's going to happen quicker than I originally forecast.
Okay, so you owe me a dinner.
Maybe.
And ESPN, I mean, a lot of people saying, the death of ESPN. Well, they're going to have a couple of Super Bowls on ESPN ABC coming up starting in 27. And they're going to have college football everywhere. The NBA, they're probably going to re-up. So I I don't know. Maybe ESPN is not going to affect anybody's life. Maybe overall, they're not going to make as much money as a company. They're still going to make money, just not as much. Sorry, shareholders, perhaps. But in terms of being in part of a sports fans' life, ESPN is not going anywhere. These two, though, second story, have shown up. Amazon and Apple, that's been a huge story. We talked about with ESPN DTC, you have NBC with Peacock, you got CBS with Paramount Plus, we go on and on. Warner Brothers Discovery with Max. Everybody has their streaming arm, Fox with Tubi. But then Amazon and Apple, though, I mean, come on, they're the leaders, and what their impact is going to be over the next 100 shows, next 1,000 shows, next 10,000 shows. We're not making 10,000 shows, but we're not, maybe make 1,000. But the Apple, Amazon, you mentioned Amazon as your who's up with Marie Donahue. What do you take when I say Amazon and Apple? What's your view?
So it's funny because they are here and they're making significant deals. Neither company yet has made a deal where they've gone head to head with a linear traditional television network. There still is league executives, conference executives still prioritize the reach of those networks. And I'm just going to be a little bit negative here on them. In terms of 100 episodes ago, I thought when they got in, they were going to get in big. And when they got in big, they can, look, Amazon and Apple can buy and sell ESPN, CBS, and NBC.
I disagree so much. I'm gonna let you finish, but I disagree so much with what you're saying right now.
They're not spending. They're not overspending on these. They're being very disciplined in what they're paying for this. The Pac-12 deal was a bargain deal for Apple. The MLS deal, that was a very good deal for Apple. They're putting the risk back on these conferences in a way that the TV networks never have been able to do.
John, I'm going to say 3 letters to you. NFL. Amazon is in business with the NFL. I mean, they spent $1 billion and they got
package. We've done this before.
I know, but John, where did when ESPN got the NFL, where did they start?
Again, that is the cable TV business of 40 years ago. If you're using that model, that's not a good model for 2020.
What do you mean? When a new entity comes in, they don't come in doing the Super Bowl. You got to prove it. And then you overpay to get into the NFL. Apple, you're right about, they haven't proven that they're going to overpay for anything to get in. Like, do they really want in on sports? And in defense of Apple, this is me defending Apple here on sports. Here we go. They're in the messy business. I mean, like we talk about like where you want to be, right? Do you want to be in the NFL business? Yes. You want to be in the NBA business? Yes. Baseball, we go on and on, right? You want to be in the messy business if you can. What he's actually being paid and getting a cut of, does that make sense? I would say for MLS and Apple, in terms of doing a deal with Messi, that's like doing a deal with Taylor Swift. It makes perfect sense, and those are big time deals. Now, I agree with you. Apple has not proven that it will go all in. The NBA is going to tell us a lot. I do think Amazon is, to me, a little bit more, I think it's more likely than Apple that they do a Thursday night deal. Now, is Apple involved somehow? I mean, there is like virtual reality and all these other things that they could get involved in, which is kind of the next thing that Meta has tried to get into. And then Apple, and I'm sure Amazon's working on things as well. And so maybe they get in that way, but to act like they haven't got in big, yeah, I agree. They're not just going crazy spending like everything, because what they're offering is different. They don't have to fill a schedule. They can just have things on. You don't think that at some point soon that Amazon's going to have something on Friday nights? I certainly do.
For the past decade, Nirvana for every single sports league, sports team, and sports conference was, these big, deep-pocketed digital companies are going to come in, and boy, it's going to be great. It hasn't been great. They haven't been spending the amount of money. NASCAR's rights are up right now. The Pac-12 decided that they'd rather disband than accept Apple's offer. These offers financially are not what anybody in the sports business were hoping for 100 episodes ago. And so, yeah, they're deciding where to spend. And so Amazon spending on the NFL Thursday Night Football, it's a good deal for them. They were my who's up. They're where they're not
But
spending
why
on.
should they? I don't understand. Like, all right, like cry me a river for these sports leagues and conferences if like the digital players don't want to spend as much as like just because they don't want to spend where it doesn't make sense. I mean, that's their
Suggesting that you're
broad.
not going to be as big into sports as people were thinking. So we're talking about
Wait,
Amazon and Apple, the sports. They're not
you
getting
really
that.
hold on a second. Amazon is in the NFL. There's a pretty good chance they're going to be in the NBA. Hold on a second. They're going to be in the NBA.
There's a chance.
They also have Amazon also has a business relationship with the New York Yankees. Do you see what they're doing?
They're in last place of the AL East. Is this where we
last
create
place in New York Yankees? They're still the Yankees, okay? They might be in last place, but they're still the Yankees. They have business with them. They have a deal with the WNBA. They have international deals with the NBA.
There are big sports that they've just said no to. They are not getting in. Look,
wait, what did they say no to? They didn't do the Pac-12?
They didn't do the Pac-12.
Pac-12 is Pac-4 now, so that was probably smart.
Well, it would have been the Pac-12, but they didn't do MLS. You know, they tried to get into the Big Ten and didn't bid enough to
They didn't get the Big Ten. I'll give you that one. They didn't get the Big Ten.
Big Ten. I'm just saying that they are not the panacea that these league executives thought they would be, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, but your thesis is wrong. They're involved with the NFL, Yankees.
Sports is about more than the NFL. It is.
I don't know. If you've been paying attention to media, the NFL is number one. It's if I were to say what we cover, I would say it's 30%, maybe more, of importance.
Then you have 50 leagues beyond that. They're not involved with those 50 leagues.
No, they don't want the smaller leagues. Yeah, the smaller leagues are on their own. Yeah, you're right. They're not.
The NBA. That's it. Those are the two.
No, baseball. They went on baseball.
We Yankees or whatever. Yeah.
Like the Yankees. They got 21 games on the Yankees. If you live in New York, Amazon's giving you value. Wednesday Yankees, Thursday. Everyone hates it, but Wednesday Yankees, Thursday you got Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, they don't have national baseball. They don't have hockey. They don't have college football.
Apple got national baseball. It's a terrible deal, but I mean, it's not a terrible deal because it's not a lot of money, but nobody's watching.
The Apple. No, I'm talking Amazon.
No, I know Amazon. So I'm saying, but you said we're doing Amazon and Apple. Apple is involved. They got an MLS. They don't seem Apple. Look, they didn't do a Sunday ticket deal. I would say Amazon seems way more invested right now in sports than Apple. I think that's pretty clear.
This is over the last 100 episodes. This is the one area that you and I rapidly disagree all the time.
And everyone I talk to thinks you're wrong.
All right, Andrew, on that note, number 3, let's get to topic 3, NFL media. This was the story that you are sending your kids to college on, I think. The amount of movement that we saw in the broadcaster booths a year ago was, I've been covering the beat for a while. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, when you think about it, we mentioned Tom Brady is still in the on-deck circle at Fox. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman leave Fox to go to ESPN. It all started really, I could go way back to where it really started, but if you want to be is the Tony Romo contract when he got the $18 million per year. And then, Tirico moves in for Sunday Night Booth. Al Michaels goes to Amazon. Then they try to get Sean McVay. They were going to offer $20 million. He turns it down. I think he might regret that slightly after last year's poor season. He can make it 20 mil with a kid on the way and then be picking his next head coaching job. But it'll work out for Sean McVay, I'm sure. But yeah, it's put more emphasis on the booths. Greg Olson came out, had a tremendous season. And so he and Kevin Burkhardt became the first one in a long time to break up the grouping of Al Michaels, Joe Buck, and Jim Nantz calling the Super Bowl forever. Yeah, it's been in transition. And then the overall deals. We talked about the Amazon deal. I mean, they were you say it's not that important in the NFL, but they just did deals for $110 billion. I'm going to say that again. John says not important. $110 billion. That's a B. John said, it's not. It's a little league. It's not the most important. It's the most important league. It's totally misrepresented. You love doing that too. That's the thing of the pod. John, something that I don't like John does during the pod. He'll be like, we think this. And I'm thinking to myself, I never thought this. You think this and you're putting maybe I think that. Let me speak for myself. So I'm going to put those words. Now, I know the NFL is important.
Yeah, the NFL it's a cute little league.
Exactly.
Here's the deal about those NFL deals. I won't talk about how Apple passed on Sunday Ticket.
They did. No, that's true. You're right. They did, but they brought in another one of the digital players in Google. So now we have Google involved. It's just, here's the thing about it. They're not, and this is the big thing I think MLS through you and Apple tries to get into the pod, which is true. They're not doing traditional deals. They don't look at these deals like we look at a broadcast deal. And so, do I think Google, YouTube, do they look like they're going to be putting on games ever? It doesn't, maybe one day, but it doesn't feel like that's what they're doing. They want to house games. That's why like ESPN and Apple as having some kind of, or one of these, maybe YouTube, maybe it's Amazon, some sort of partnership makes some sense to me, because I think they want to house the games. They don't necessarily want to produce games. I mean, maybe, but like that doesn't seem like a big part of their businesses.
Well, I feel like this pod, I'm taking in the role of being exceedingly negative. And so I'm going to be exceedingly negative on the NFL's media deals, which was $110 billion. And so you saw...
I want to hear this. Wait, exceedingly negative that they got $110 billion. Okay.
Well, you saw NBC is paying more than $1 billion per year more for the exact same inventory. And you're seeing Fox pay more than $1 billion more per year for the pretty much the exact same inventory. Same for CBS. ESPN's a little bit below that. And so when we talk about, or when I talk about, I did the royal we there, Andrew, but when I talk about Amazon and Apple not digging into their deep pockets and just keeping these sports leagues afloat, there's a real reckoning that is coming for leagues that are not the NFL, big college, or the NBA, because these TV networks can't just make money out of nothing. Like it's not like all of a sudden they're going to go to the advertisers and say, we need $1 billion more. It doesn't work that way. They are in a cord-cutting environment. They're making less from that part of things. And so when you see a league like MLS have to go to Apple, or you see a conference like the Pac-12, it had to go to Apple. It's because the money's it's drying up, or it's being saved for other things. Do you like ESPN? They could have done a Pac-12 deal and been okay, but that would that hinder what they would be able to bid for the NBA, which they value a whole lot more than the Pac-12. So that money that the NFL is bringing in is it's really creating an environment that it's not a bubble bursting, but I've never seen this sort of like pessimism around these rights deals outside of those big leagues as I have today.
Well, I mean, look, no graph in the history of the world has just gone up, right? That just doesn't happen. So it does make sense at some point it's either going to plateau or go back down in terms of the rights. And we've already seen it in college. And where does that go? I mean, it probably has a lot to do with if people can figure out how to make streaming successful, as either your core business or your side hustle in terms of how you monetize. And then the gambling space, that's what we're talking about with ESPN. I mean, them adding $200 million a year, that does, most of the Big 12 deal, right? Or probably actually, they probably paid half of it. So, or a little more than half, or maybe that is the Big 12. They're probably paying about 200, I'd say, per year. So, that allows them to do those type of things. And so, yeah, but I don't think the NFL did anything wrong. Like where they should have gone for less money.
No, I'm not saying the NFL did anything wrong. I'm just saying that there's a knock-on effect for them taking that much money out of the market,
out of the system. Yeah, well, yeah, the NFL, because they're the most powerful. That's why Amazon getting a deal with the NFL was a good thing for Amazon and like showing their importance in sports.
For the worst package in the NFL provides.
I'm gonna let this go because people are probably like, let it go. But like, what package do you think they should have gotten?
They're Amazon. Pay up. Get a Super Bowl. They could have paid up. Totally.
They're not putting. I mean, money. I guess if they doubled what other people are paying, but then you're making the precedent. You have to just get in first.
How do you think ESPN got? They're paying more than everybody else because they knew they had to pay more.
They had a terrible deal. They've recently made their deals better. The previous deals, they had the terrible Monday night schedule. They had no Super Bowl. They barely had playoffs.
they were involved with the NFL. I felt that's all from what you say, that's all you want to do is get involved with the NFL.
ESPN started in with the NFL in the mid to late 80s. Now we're 2023. Amazon just starting in with the NFL. They got their first domestic deal on Thursday nights. So you don't get the best deal. And it actually worked out. They made a kind of a smart deal in this sense, is that the NFL is very incentivized to make it better. The schedule is better this year. Flex scheduling late in the season on Thursday night, moving to Sunday, Thursday is ridiculous for fans. It's terrible. It's awful. Roger Goodell, that's terrible. However, that's still a good thing for Amazon if it wants better games in theory. They'll probably do it maybe once, maybe not even at all. But that's, they're Thursday night football is not a bad, that's where you start. Like, you're not going to get the Fox or CBS package if you're Amazon, that first deal.
After 100 episodes, I thought maybe you'd be right every now and then.
Oh,
let's go to topic 4, NBA media. We talked about the market as being really bad for a lot of leagues. I don't think that's the case with the NBA, and this is why. There's more than one bidder for a couple of packages. ESPN wants it. Turner wants to keep it. NBC wants to get in. Amazon wants to be in. And Apple is always lurking as somebody that wants to kick the tires. The question is going to be, how many packages is the NBA going to try to create to try to drive as much as they can? I think the NBA is fine.
No, I think the NBA is going to do real well. We talked about it last week. ESPN is going to, I think, retain the finals likely. I think they'll do less regular season games. I don't think they care that much about this new tournament, but maybe they'll get involved in that. And then I think the digital players, if I'm an Amazon and you get Thursdays and you do get in on this new tournament, I think you want to own things. That's what Amazon wants to do. I mean, I think when you look at Thursday night football, it's not football. It's owning a night in America. And you could say that the ratings weren't as good, and they weren't as good as compared to Fox. They still own Thursday night. That's where you look to. There's one night a week for 4 months of the year where you go to Thursday night and Amazon owns it. That's pretty powerful.
Do you know how they own Thursday night, or why we know they own Thursday night?
Why is it?
ESPN and Fox did not counter program. If I was ESPN, I'd be putting a big college football game up against Thursday night football and try to keep people on the linear service. And they didn't want to do that. They knew even though it's going to digital and it's going to Amazon Prime,
they have a game on. They have a Thursday night.
Have a game on, but it's generally
it's not the game, not a great game. You're saying, okay. And so I think the NBA, when you look at it, I think they're very well positioned. I don't think they're going to triple what they're getting, but maybe double. And NBC, I think broadcast is I think what's going to be interesting about the NBA deal is how much broadcast is involved and how they look at distribution compared to money. And is distribution more, again, within reason, more important than money? And we talked to Yormark, the big gets coming up in a couple of minutes, and he talked about what they were thinking about in terms of the digital world compared to the linear world and where it stands now, and when their contract's up in 2030. I think it'll be interesting to see where the NBA comes out. I think they're going to follow the NFL model, in my opinion. I think they're going to be heavy as much as they can, broadcast and cable, and then there'll be a digital player, at least one, and most likely I'd say Amazon. And so I think that's where that nets out in terms of their deals, and I think they're going to make a lot of money.
I can't wait to get to our big get. As I said, we've already done the interview, and Brett Yormark's as good as advertised. Let's go to our 5th topic, the RSN implosion. I talked about this with my Who's Down and sort of what happened. I've described it before as sort of a hurricane, a slow-moving hurricane that was coming up. It's hit, and the big questions that we're going to be focused on over the next 100 episodes is, what does the NBA, the MLB, and NHL do with these local rights? More importantly, what are teams going to be doing? Because they're going to be losing revenue. They're going to be losing, they're not going to be making as much from their local media rights as they were with the RSNs. We've seen some local broadcasters step in. Scripps, Sinclair has some out there, Next Star as well. And so that's an interesting way of moving forward. We're seeing direct to consumer and more of the teams trying to dive into that aspect of things. None of these are going to bring in as much money, and it's too early to tell right now. It's too early to even make some sort of prediction about how we're going to be watching these games moving forward. But it is a story that's not going to end anytime soon.
And the fun thing about doing the pod is that, we write a lot of stuff and research and talk to a lot of people. That's why I wanted to do the pod with you, because I knew how well informed you are. And so I don't want to give you story ideas, but I think it's a little more SBJ than New York Post. A story that I'm interested in trying to understand. Maybe you have an answer now, but I think if I were to do it, I'd need to make some calls. Like, I get everyone just says you can't make as much money digitally as compared to the RSNs, and that makes sense, right? Everyone was paying for your cable bill, and how are you going to do that? But can baseball, let's say, for example, be successful in a digital world selling their games? And I think subscriptions like misunderstood overall, like especially when you're selling like Apple is doing with MLS globally in terms of that business. Now, how it affects all your other businesses, that's not for me to say. But is there a world where the Padres can be successful and make a lot of money selling their games digitally?
No, but I think they could be successful having MLB control selling those games locally, because if I lived in San Diego and I was an Orioles fan, I'd be able, I would just, and I'd cut the cord. I would just subscribe to, the MLB at bat, and every game's a local game. And so in a way, one of the things about baseball is that it's become the rise of the RSNs. It's become such a regional sport. Yep. And how can you make it become national again? Because I live in DC and I want to see Shohei Ohtani. Make it easy for me to watch those games. And
doesn't that kill the national? But doesn't that the thing about like the Apple deal is that like it makes sense. Like I've said before, if you started right now at ground zero, then the way Apple wants to do it and the amount of money that they have, I'd put them as the leaders and they probably win. But we're not at ground zero, right? We're not there. And if you're the leagues, doesn't it kill the idea of like exclusive national games? Like the NHL, for example. Now ESPN does carve out a few where it's like you can only watch on Hulu or ESPN Plus or, like ways that, but that kind of frustrates fans, I think, more than feels like they give them value, even though a lot of people have ESPN Plus or have Hulu. So it's maybe not as big a deal, but I don't know. It kind of takes away you're paying one side, but you're taking it out of the other side, because if all games are available, then what is Fox doing on a game of the week?
Yeah, and you've identified one of the things that baseball has to get through. And one idea is that Fox would have an exclusive window where there would be no other games during that period. Same thing maybe with ESPN. The other one is they could possibly get these Bally Sports rights, depending on what happens with Diamond Sports, which runs them. The other big problem is some of the main markets. Yes Network, it's a successful RSN that prints money. Do they really want to sort of just give up their rights and give up the New York market to baseball? Convincing the biggest brands, the biggest teams in baseball, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Cubs, the Dodgers, the Orioles and Mets, and of course, convincing them to give up their rights for the greater good of this streaming service that I just described is going to be that's going to be a really tough road.
100%. So that's going to be a big story next 100 episodes. Where that goes, and I got to be honest, it's like that. Those are a couple of the stories, especially the RSN one, where it just the tentacles could get into leagues. Like that's why people always say when you cover sports media, yeah, you're covering football, you're covering basketball, you're covering baseball, you're covering all these things because media is what drives all this stuff. And the RSN is a huge example of like where that's going to go. And I think it's going to be a lot more haves and have-nots, and that's a problem for baseball. I mean, they're trying to make ways to make it more fair, but in terms of money, it's going to be haves and have-nots, because even though the last place Yankees aren't doing that well this year, they're still the most important rights to have. Even if you have Adley Rutschman and Kevin Brown. By the way, before we get to the big get, Kevin Brown, does he have to leave? I wrote on Monday in New York Post Sports Plus, he needs to leave. I think he has a year. Maybe they picked up his extension, and maybe he has another year. But if I'm them, if I'm Kevin Brown, I think I gotta leave the Orioles.
I don't know.
Or outlast the ownership, which is possible.
That's possible. I think if I'm Kevin Brown, and Baltimore's my adopted city. I bought a house there, and he's happy in the community. And if you're Kevin Brown and you hear people in Camden Yards cheering free Kevin Brown, what does that do to you? Like, I know the ownership has some issues, but when he calls a game, he's connecting with these fans. And so those fans like him. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as, that owner made me mad. Now I have to go. I think that there's a tug for the Orioles. And just listening to him, I was texting you. You had no interest, but I was texting Monday night during the Mariners game after some wild plays in that game, and Kevin Brown was on the call, and that's why people love him.
All right, how about the statement though that he had?
Yeah, that was tough.
I think there was probably a lot of negotiation with that statement, and then they finally got there. And that was probably the only way you get back in the air, which I wrote the other day. You got it. Sometimes I understand it didn't look great, and you're dealing with irrational people, so you have to do some things. But I still think you kind of have to get out of there. I don't know. I'd rent, not buy, if I were my advice.
I hope he sticks around. Andrew, I am excited to introduce our big get this week, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark. Yormark started at the conference 1 year ago. I mean, August 1st. Geez, Brett, it seems like 10 years to me. But Brett, in the past 12 months, has completely remade the Big 12 Conference. Brett is a sports business lifer. He started selling TV ad time for a bunch of Milwaukee sports teams, had a stint at NASCAR. And listen to this one, Andrew. He sold tickets to the beleaguered New Jersey Nets when they played in Continental Arena. Do you know what's hard? Not the Big 12. Selling tickets to one of the worst NBA teams playing in one of the worst arenas. Brett, how did you do it? He engineered the move going to Brooklyn, and he ended up with a job at Rock Nation before moving to the Big 12. Brett, thank you very much for joining us.
Thrilled to be with both you today. Really, it's an honor, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, before we get to the Big 12, though, were you there when they almost changed the name to the Swamp Dragons?
I was.
And how close did that actually come? How close did the Nets actually come to being called the Swamp Dragons, which is one of the great things ever?
The president at the time was a gentleman by the name of John Spolster, pretty iconic figure in the world of sports business. He brought that to ownership. I mean, it was certainly something that was vetted out at the highest levels. And at the time, the Secaucus 7 were a little risk adverse and decided against it. But he pushed that agenda as far as he could.
Yeah, that would have been great. I like that name, the Swamp Dragons. Nets, kind of boring. All right, let's get to the Big 12. That's why you're here. You took the job a little more than a year ago. When you took it and you looked at the landscape of the Big 12 and college sports, what were your goals? What did you see?
Well, I think generally speaking, as I was embarking on this chapter, if you will, professionally, I wanted to go somewhere where I thought I could have a transformative moment, where I thought I could bring about some positive change. I thought there was some low-hanging fruit. I thought there was real opportunity to do some things differently, and that my skills were pretty transferable. Obviously, I have a lot to learn, and I continue to have a lot to learn as it relates to collegiate athletics. But I just felt that the conference was in a place where we could elevate and amplify the profile, the narrative. And if we got lucky, we could do some special things. And thankfully, it's been a pretty productive year for us.
It has. And when you say low-hanging fruit in terms of amplifying, what do you mean by that?
I mean, in its simplest form, just from a business perspective, the conference hadn't changed its ticket pricing for our basketball championship in 10 years. Okay. We hadn't really transformed the conference into thinking about business. And I just felt there was real opportunity there. And thankfully, I inherited an incredible board that is very like-minded, and they wanted to disrupt, and they wanted to innovate, and they wanted to create, and they wanted to kind of push some boundaries. And that was really focused on how do we evolve into more of a business. Obviously, at the core, it's about student athletes and serving our key constituents. But we also need to look at it from a business perspective. And that resonated, obviously, during the interview process. So I just felt that from that perspective, there was a lot of low-hanging fruit to drive revenue, to create value, to create new IP, to nationalize our profile, et cetera, et cetera. And they gave me the ability to do that.
So over the past several weeks, very busy weeks, Colorado, the Arizona schools, with realignment, are you done?
We're done. I mean, we had a vision when I came on board. There was three things that we really wanted to address. Big picture items. One, we wanted to do our TV deal and go out early, stabilize the conference, and give us, a foundation for the future effectively. Two, we wanted to resolve the Oklahoma-Texas situation. When I was introduced, effectively on my first day, that was a big issue. Would they leave a year early or not? And what that relationship might look like going forward. And then the last of the three items was expansion. Could we set ourselves up for future expansion? My board had an appetite to pursue that. Those were the three things we wanted to do. We accomplished all three in my first year. And when we thought about expansion, it was about getting into a fourth time zone. It was about potentially heading west. I was very intentional about it as far as, our goals. And thankfully, we realized what effectively was the dream scenario about a week ago when the four corner schools, Colorado being the first, all agreed to join the Big 12.
The idea of realignment seems to pop up every couple of years. What could make you dive back into this?
Well, for me, there were some guiding principles relative to expansion. But ultimately, it's about value creation. There's no need just to expand for the sake of expanding. But when you think about, and, we'll talk about our media partners, what ultimately is going to create value for the Big 12 in that next TV cycle. And we go back into the market in January 30. Whatever we do now sets us up for that moment. We feel now being in 10 states, having over 90 million people in our footprint, being in 4 time zones, gives the Big 12 a chance to do some amazing things when we get back into that next TV negotiation. So the number one guiding principle for us was value creation. And it'll always be that as we think about expansion, or for that matter, anything else we do.
Now, Brett, we're on our 100th show. I don't know, John might have specific numbers, but we've talked about the Pac-12, the Big 12, and college realignment, maybe 25% of the show. So it's been a big topic here. And one of the big decisions was you guys jumping in front of the Pac-12 to do your TV deal with ESPN and Fox. Can you take us through your thought process? And, did you think, oh, maybe we should wait? What was your thought process in terms of what you decided to do there?
So even when I was introduced a year ago, July, effectively at Media Day, and then I took the job August 1 of last year. Going into both those moments, I had the idea of going early. I just felt that we needed stability and clarity moving forward, especially on the heels of Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Even before I took the job, I went to see Mark Shapiro. And I said, Mark, if I get this job, I'm hiring Endeavor. Mark and I have known each other for years. Mark, resembles me in many respects. He's aggressive. And I needed someone on the team that, not only had his mindset, but his experience and his approach. When I got this job, the first thing I did was outsource some thinking and strategy, because when I inherited the conference, we didn't have much of an infrastructure here. But the number one thing that Endeavor, was asked to do was to evaluate our TV deal, to identify kind of, what the goal post would look like moving forward. And, could we get something done quickly? And we went into the market, as you know, very quickly. And by October, we had effectively put together a deal with ESPN and Fox. And, we had a verbal agreement. And it was the right thing for us to do because it became the catalyst for everything we've done since then, whether it's creating new IP, new events, the Oklahoma and Texas solution, and then ultimately expansion. It was the number one catalyst. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that was really the last big deal that was available, media deal, especially in our industry of collegiate athletics. But there was no doubt that at the time we wanted ESPN, and still do, ESPN and Fox, so they could help elevate and amplify our schools, our conference, for all the right reasons. I do think that, on a go-forward basis, the digital distribution, might be something that will play a big role in that next TV cycle. But right now, we wanted linear, we wanted exposure, we wanted marketing, we wanted ESPN and Fox. And I said, if I could get a good deal, maybe not a great deal, but a good deal, we were going to go early. And my board felt the same way, and we did it. And I'm glad we did. And, sometimes in life, you got to get lucky. And we got a little lucky, because had we not done that deal at the time we did, who knows if I'd be on the 100th show here today.
You might not be. Now, in
the
the
tenor
ESPN,
of the questions might be a little bit different, I think.
Well,
right?
maybe
exactly. We'd have
maybe
you
I'd
on.
be on, but the questions would be different. You're absolutely right.
Now with ESPN, I reported this, when it happened months and months ago, there was a pro rata clause put in there in terms of Power 5 teams. I don't think Fox had that clause. How has that process worked in terms of adding teams and in terms of your conversations, even at the beginning when you first did the deal, the idea of adding teams, just so people can understand that, because it's been a big topic in terms of college sports and how that works exactly in your original conversations. And as you move forward, how do the networks get involved in terms of the realignment aspect?
The idea of expansion started here at the conference. I mean, this is something we wanted to do. We had a strategy for expansion, and we had goals for expansion. Ultimately, we got to bring the partners in, because our ESPN and Fox are partners in that effort, but they're not driving it. The decision making was done here at the conference amongst myself, my colleagues, the ADs, and our board. Ultimately, once we come up with that strategy and approach, and we feel that we're making some progress, we address it with our media partners to see if that type of expansion creates value for all the right reasons today, tomorrow, and into the future. And with that, also comes the conversation for funding and to help support that, that expansion. So it was a collaborative effort ultimately at the end, but the idea to expand and where we want to expand to is something clearly done at the conference level with our key stakeholders.
What about with regards to the pro rata? Is that something that's in the contracts, or is that something still to be negotiated? How would you describe that with the new schools coming in?
Well, I mean, we do have a pro rata clause with ESPN. It's not in the Fox deal, but we've talked to Fox. They see the value of expansion and what it can mean for us today and in the future, and they're involved, financially, and very supportive. So it worked out well for us.
Brett, when you took the job a year ago, there was a lot of speculation. I did a lot of speculation. It seemed like a terrible job to take. Your predecessor was in sort of open and public warfare with ESPN over the Texas and Oklahoma situation, and it appeared as though the Big 12 wasn't long for this world. As you got in here and you went under the hood, how serious was that speculation? Was that close to happening at all?
No, I mean, I unfortunately there was a lot of negative energy around the conference, which was unfortunate. Bob Bowlesby did a heck of a job. I told him when I took the job, all he's doing is passing the baton to me, and he gave me a really great platform. When you think about his recovery efforts with the 4 schools, Houston and UCF and Cincinnati and BYU. I mean, those were great gets on the heels of Oklahoma and Texas, and really solidified us. And in fact, if those 4 schools weren't here, I'm not sure I would have had the ability to go early with ESPN and Fox, because they really helped me in my storytelling. When you think about BYU and what they bring as a national brand, you think about Cincinnati and their participation in the CFP, You think about Houston in basketball and an emerging, football program, and then you look at UCF and their progress, from an athletic standpoint over the years. So I was able to take all of that, combined with the continuing aid, to create a great story for in our efforts to get the new TV deal done. So I think the negative energy around the conference was really misstated. And I saw a wonderful opportunity to seize the moment, and to take what Bob had left and really build it for the future. And listen, wherever I've been, you guys know my career. I've been a bit of a change agent. I've never inherited, those, really shiny platforms, and for whatever the reason. But I just felt there was real opportunity here. And I felt Bob left me in a great place, and it was really about me taking some of the assets and really leveraging them on a go-forward basis, which we first were able to do with the TV deal, and we're now doing in other ways.
Now, you probably are aware of this, but a lot of people in college football, they say the biggest rivalry is maybe Army Navy, but it turns out it's Big 12 Pac-12. Has become the biggest rivalry in college sports. When you look at the situation with the Pac-12 and the other commissioner of the Pac-12, George Kliavkoff, how have you handled that in terms of, obviously you brought over some teams from the Pac-12, which hurts them and helps you. How does that work in terms of your communication with Kliavkoff and the Pac-12, and how does that all go down behind the scenes?
Andrew, it's a great question. It's a great question. And when I first took the job in August of 22, within the first week or two, there was a meeting of the commissioners, the A5 commissioners in Chicago. And at that point in time, it was on the heels of USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. And it was kind of a get together of the commissioners and an opportunity for all to break bread and discuss what had happened, and really, where we're going moving forward. And as the rookie in the room, I made it clear that there are going to be moments where we're going to compete. And there's other moments where we need to come together as a group. And it's no different than in any career move I've made. When I was with the NBA, you have your board of governors meetings and you're together and it's collegial and you're trying to figure out what's in the best interest of the NBA and professional basketball. But then when you go back to Brooklyn, in my particular case, you're competing with the other 29 teams, especially when it comes to free agents, et cetera. And I kind of brought that mindset to the meeting, saying, hey, there are moments where we're going to compete. It's never personal. And then there's moments we all got to come together and do what's best for the industry. What I have learned here during expansion, and I still do have a little bit of a knot in my stomach, I never want my gain to be someone else's loss. That's a little different here. And on the heels of not Colorado, but of all four corner schools coming, I texted George, reached out to him. Obviously, he was busy. He and I spoke last week. And effectively, I said, hey, I'm sorry it came down to this. And I'm sorry I put you in a tough position, but this was something that, we had to do. And, this was something that the board and our key stakeholders encouraged. And I'm sorry that my gain is your loss. And we had a very collegial conversation. George was fantastic. And I'll be seeing him again in a couple of weeks at some industry meetings. I'm not one to hide. And again, I've been very intentional about expansion. And I did that in an effort to make sure that I didn't do, expansion didn't happen in someone's shadow. It didn't happen at night. It wasn't a shock and awe moment. Everyone knew the Big 12 had an appetite to expand. And I maybe some people in the industry didn't like that I was so intentional about it, but I'm very transparent. In fact, I telegraphed it. And I just felt that was the right way to do it versus other things that I witnessed and observed in our industry over time, where transparency really wasn't really what happened. I felt I had to do it a little differently, and that's really about my personality and how I do things, generally speaking.
And when you talked about the TV deal earlier in terms of linear being very important to you for this deal, and you could see maybe digital becoming even more important for the next deal, why does linear still win the day if you're a conference commissioner at this moment?
Because I think we want exposure. It's still the biggest platform. And I wanted to give our student athletes the biggest platform possible. The marketing that ESPN and Fox do and the consumers they reach, it's they do it better than most, if not all. And I just felt that given where we are as a conference, we have a lot of emerging brands. When you think about our schools, they need that marketing, they need that promotion. And I just felt that was in our best interest. When you think about our first game this year, which happens to be Colorado at TCU, it'll be on Big Noon, Fox. My God, that platform is going to be great for us. ESPN offers so much, throughout the year, in everything they do to support college football. So we wanted to be a part of that. And in our new TV deal, we will be the only conference that's both with Fox and ESPN, which is a huge differentiator for us. And I think a selling point when you think about recruitment and getting on the consciousness of future student athletes. I think that's an important part of it.
Brent, I've heard you talk in the past several times about the idea that basketball is undervalued. And sure enough, in this pod, we're talking about the football and the football rivalries. There have been some really good sources of mine that have described the Big 12 as much of a basketball conference as a football conference. Is the market overvaluing football as opposed to at the expense of basketball?
I don't know if they're overvaluing football, but I'm a firm believer that basketball is undervalued. When you think about our aggregate audience that we deliver to our media partners annually between basketball and football, basketball today, and it's growing, is about 25% of that total audience. We're not getting 25 cents on the dollar for basketball. Okay. And it's growing. So I'm excited about where we're going. And, when you think about realignment and expansion, my goal wasn't to compromise football. My goal was to grow football while also growing basketball. And I think we've done that. When you think about the 4 incoming schools, Arizona coming into this conference, even Colorado, who will be a top 25 school this year, and Arizona State is obviously very, very good. And Utah's improving. We doubled down on basketball while also improving football. So I'm really excited. And we are the deepest conference, I think, in America when it comes to football, but arguably we are the number one conference in basketball. And I'm excited about that. And basketball also is a catalyst for me to do a lot of different things. It's a catalyst for international expansion. Very tough to take football internationally, but basketball is very easy. And it's a big part of our Mexico strategy, which I announced a couple months ago, where we're going to Mexico in the fall of 2024 with Kansas and Houston. And we'll be announcing some other initiatives around basketball and how we're going to monetize it. So I'm excited about the opportunity to further leverage basketball, especially in that next media cycle. I have gone on record saying maybe we bifurcate football and basketball. Maybe we don't. But, we'll have the optionality for sure to do it. And we'll see where we can create the most value.
Could you add, when you talk about expansion in basketball, specifically there's 2 teams out there or 2 universities out there that have great basketball programs in Connecticut and Gonzaga. Where does that stand?
Well, right now, I did have conversations with UConn and Gonzaga, and unfortunately, things didn't work out only because, the dream scenario unfolded for us. So those conversations, are no longer. I'm a big admirer of both those programs. They're fantastic for all the right reasons. But right now, I'm focused on the transition of those 4 in right now. And also, how do I leverage the fact that, I'm now a 16-team league in 10 states with 90 million people in 4 different time zones. So that's my focus right now.
Now, Brett, you said if things hadn't gone differently, we might be asking you harder questions. So let me just do one that's a little bit different. The Big 12 tournament. Okay, I'm a writer at heart, covered the Yankees forever, been in a million press boxes. You had these people on the moon, the press people. We need to move them down. What's going to happen with that? I got to speak up for my fellow writers who travel there. They pay the money to get there. I saw the pictures. What's our thinking there?
Andrew, let me tell you a couple of things about that. First of all, I was very transparent about it.
Okay.
So last year, Basketball Media Day in October, I told the media, we're changing your seat locations and we're moving you up.
Okay.
Because we had an opportunity to create 208 premium seats that drove incredible revenue and value for our key stakeholders. And again, all those dollars go back to our member institutions. Okay. Yes, we put them upstairs. We afforded them a great culinary experience. And by the way, I sat up there for most of the sessions to experience it myself, because I would never ask anyone to do something I would do myself. Okay. Now, was it like the seating they had previously? No, it wasn't. Okay. But at the time, I felt it was the best location given the scarcity of tickets. Think about it. We don't even go on public sale and we sell out our championship, and that's 10 teams. Now we're moving to 16. Now, that being said, I did address the media afterwards, and I gave them my commitment to see whether or not I could modify that experience for them and make it better. And you know me, I mean, even though we haven't really engaged personally, I'm a relationship guy, okay? And I want everyone to be happy. You know, I'm in the customer service business and still am. And I'm going to try to make it better for them next spring. That's my goal.
And I would say the argument I'd make is that these places now, I know especially the media gets a lot of criticism for being negative, this thing, but it's promoting your game, right? Like all these people are spending money to be there. And I think you're right. Like the idea that the media should be, next on courtside, that's very understandable that you'd move them out of courtside, but I think you need to be able to see the game well to really cover something appropriately. And again, it's promoting, I think, what you're doing in large part. Yes, there's controversies. We're annoying. We ask hard questions, et cetera, but I do think that, there is that side of it as well.
I agree with you. And by the way, the media does a fantastic job covering our conference. Fantastic. I have no issues with the media. They've been fair, better than fair. So I'm committed to try to make that experience better. 100%.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Andrew, I have one last question for Brett. I can't let you go, Brett, without bringing up your brother, Michael, a proud graduate of the University of Maryland, College Park. He's your identical twin. He's also in the sports business. He's a top Rock Nation executive. I need to know, when was the last time either you posed as Michael or Michael posed as you?
Well, interesting enough, it never really happened. As much as we look, very much alike, and maybe even more so now than ever before. I would say the last time there was a bit of confusion was when I was dating my now wife. And we just celebrated, matter of fact, today is my anniversary, 10 years.
Wow.
And
100th episode, it's your 10-year anniversary. I love it.
10th anniversary today. And interesting enough, when Elena, my wife, was getting to know me, my brother would stop by because she runs a restaurant in Manhattan. Andrew, I don't know if you know that, but it's Fresco by Scotto on 52nd Street between Park and Madison. If you haven't been there, you need to go. Ask for Elena. She'll take great care of you.
Okay, great.
So Michael used to come into the restaurant while we were dating, and she would say, "Hey, honey, how are you?" And Michael would say, "Hey, no, I'm the other one. I'm not Brett." That was probably the last time any kind of confusion has happened. Unfortunately, Michael and I haven't been in a lot of the same places together because he lives in London now. As you said, he's building the international business for Rock Nation. He's done a fantastic job. He's taken them into the consulting business in Europe, but he's also gotten into the talent management on the sports side, big in European soccer, big in rugby. So I haven't spent a lot of time with my brother, and we get together for family events and things of that nature. So there hasn't been a lot of confusion. But I am going to take him to a college football game this year, and I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to call him the commissioner. And it'll be interesting whether or not he just nods his head as if he is or not. So we'll see.
This is good news for us in the 100th episode. We just broke some news because, John, there's a lot of talk throughout this whole thing about this deadline and that deadline. Now we know it all wrapped up. Brett had to be done before his 10th anniversary, or there might not have been an 11th anniversary. I think we figured out where the deadlines were.
No, listen,
we only
I'm
knew
blessed,
this before.
guys. Listen, I appreciate being on the show today. You guys do a fantastic job. And the only thing I would say, as we kind of conclude is, and I've been saying this for a year, but I meant it, but I mean it more now than ever before. Never been a better time to be part of the Big 12 than right now. And I mean that, from every perspective. And I'm really excited about our future. And when you think about our conference, we're only 27 years old. And, so I kind of look at us as a mature startup. We've got that grit. We've got that grind in our DNA now. And I'm really excited about where we're going to take this thing. I'm excited for our student athletes. I'm excited for our key stakeholders. And the best is yet to come. And I thank you both for all your support.
Brett, thank you for your time. We appreciate you taking the time to join us on the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media podcast. And we're sure we'll talk to you down the line.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Andrew, what a great interview that was. He answered every single question. I didn't see, I need to listen again, but I didn't see any dodges in there.
No, I don't think so. Hopefully he gets the press a little bit lower in that for the Big 12. That's that was my goal for the Big 12 champion, but we thank him for doing that. He was excellent and he did a great job. I mean, he likes the podcast. I was going to say, you like the podcast. Well, yeah, I mean, every 3 weeks or who's up. I mean, of course you're going to like the podcast. I mean, that's kind of how it works. It's kind of like, when you have kids, like, and they play Little League or something, the coach is as good as much as he plays your kid. Like, that's how people say, like, oh, he kind of yells at her, oh, but he plays my kid. So it's kind of like one of those things. If you get a who's up and we're praising him, of course, he thinks it's the best podcast ever. Now, a year from now, if we start ripping him, then you might not like it as much.
Well, 100 episodes. I expected streamers or something.
I'm sure Chris Mason's going to, we're just doing his live. He's going to add all his little gadgets to the pod.
100.
Like Wilbon and Kornheiser, they would have the party hats on with the horns. Our 100th episode is probably our longest. But I wanted to give a quick thanks to Chris Mason, master of the board, AC Wyatt, who came on a couple of times, a couple of episodes ago and became an instant star, and then he's becoming mute again. Well, why is that, AC?
AC's not even listening. AC cares so much about it, he's not even listening.
AC, are we boring you, man?
No.
AC's just like, what?
I was muted. I did not realize it.
AC was like, I was doing actual work. Will you finish this podcast already?
You have the floor, AC.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing.
It's just a great honor to be a part of these 100 episodes. And we really appreciate all of you guys' efforts.
The man worked at ESPN. This is not an honor. Come on.
I was probably like a little more than 2 years ago. My boss, Abe Madcore, came to me, and he had been talking with people at the New York Post and Doug Perlman, who was one of the guys involved with the Pac-12, trying to get the Pac-12 deal done. And they asked me, do you want to do a podcast with Andrew Marchand? And I said, yeah. I said yes, probably within a second, because of course I did. And it's been a ton of fun. I just wanted to acknowledge some of the people that really push this to make that happen.
Yeah, I had a similar story. Chris Shaw, the sports editor at the New York Post, called me and he said, would you want to do a podcast with John Ourand? And then I named like 10 other media writers who I'd rather do a podcast with. And then finally I said, all right, I'll do it with John. No, I'm kidding. No, I said that would be great because obviously you're informed and a great guy. So it's been good. Want to thank Chris for that call, Warren Cohn on our side as well, and all the people who work at the Post who make this all happen. So we appreciate that as well. And so that's going to do it. As always, if you can give us the 5 stars, if you like it, and review it, it's helpful, we're told, so we can get 100 more shows. So thanks everybody, and thanks to you, John.
Thanks for listening. That's our 100th episode. We go over an hour.
Yeah, maybe it should be an hour. Oh, no, that's 60. I don't know how I get to that. 100. Okay. Chris is going to have to do like 30 drops to get us to 100 minutes. Are we recording this because this is good for bloopers?
Andrew, they said it couldn't be done. It's our 100th show.
I know. Were you serious about that when you texted me? You said that there are doubters?
No, it was a joke.
Oh, okay. I was like, what are you talking about? You sound like Stephen A. and Skip
I
being
know.
like thinking like they're.
That's why it's so funny to me.
I was like, what are you talking? We had doubt. I don't think anybody cared.
They could possibly get.
John just started the pod. We're 100 episodes in. His FaceTime is still going up. It went off during the Yormark interview. It went off now. Like when we get to the 200th episode, will you learn how to turn off your FaceTime?
I like it. I like it.
Wait, is that on your computer or on your phone?
No, it's on my computer, and I got to get my daughter. I got to get her to, she's going off to school. I got to get this. I can't figure this out.